Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is our pal Phil Green. Phil is a devoted husband, and he and his lovely wife Jennifer have a beautiful family. They're almost annoying, they're also damn cute. We met Phil through Brad Hutchings, shout out to Brad, and we all know each other through Jay Moore. And since we met Phil, he's been diagnosed with ALS. I'm sure you've heard of it or heard it called Lou Gehrig's disease, but in case you don't know, the disease causes the death of neurons that control voluntary muscles. So what does Phil do about it? Well, he looks it square in the face and he goes after it head on. He's naturally a connector, so he's going to work to help all of the folks and organizations out there who fight the disease separately to align on the commonalities of their missions. I'll let Phil tell you about it, but I just wanted to preface the episode by introducing Phil as a pillar of strength, an example of cool, and a sometimes ring announcer and co-host of the Break It Down show, and most of all, someone we look up to and we're very proud to call our friend. Today, he's our guest on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Green.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Phil Green from the I Am ALS podcast, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
This is a very special podcast today. The Break It Down show presents my very, very good friend Phil. We're at the Huesing Ranch, and that's always exciting on a Friday evening with the sun setting and the golden hour, trying to make us middle-aged dudes look handsome.
I can see some horse dung right there.
Exactly. It's legit.
I had that imported. We don't actually have horses. I just brought horse dung in for Phil.
Instagram Ranch, where everything is staged. But this is a big deal because you have, well, I'm going to let you say it. You're here for a special reason. It's in the intro, but let's talk a little bit about it.
Well, not many people know, but in August, the end of August, August 29th, actually, I got an official diagnosis from USC Keck, a doctor at USC Keck, that I've been diagnosed with ALS. Started exhibiting symptoms about 2 years ago, but it takes a while to get a diagnosis, and started seeing doctors in February, and took till the end of August to get my first diagnosis, which is actually from my second opinion doctor. And then about a week later, my primary neurologist, gave me a diagnosis as well.
What does that mean?
Well, so ALS is, I'm not going to call it Lou Gehrig's disease because nobody knows who Lou Gehrig is unless you're over the age of 45. And my kids have no idea who Lou Gehrig is, and so I'm not going to propagate that brand of
formerly known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that, like Dwight Clark, had ALS and died from ALS. I would rather call it ALS. In places outside of the United States, it's called MND, for motor neuron disease. But what ALS basically is, my motor neurons, which my brain uses to communicate to my muscles to fire and function, those motor neurons are dying, and as they die, you basically lose the ability to control those muscles. So your voluntary muscle action ceases, and so you end up not using the muscle atrophies, and then you essentially become weaker, and really, in my case, it's affecting my limbs first. So my hands are weaker than they used to be. My legs are weaker than they used to be, and then it will affect my ability to swallow and my ability to breathe on my own. And so, yeah, it's not a good diagnosis. There's currently no cure for ALS. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking.
No, well, you're the one that has ALS, and we're trying to understand that, so it's okay.
Yeah, and so part of my goal, I feel like I have a new purpose in life, and I feel like...
Well, before we get into that, let me back you up a little bit. So, from going through this process with you, one of the things that struck me was that you don't necessarily take a test, and if it comes back a plus sign, you've got ALS, or if it doesn't, you don't. It's more of a process of elimination.
Correct.
You may have
Today.
this kind of cancer. Right, exactly. You may have this problem. Maybe you're vitamin deficient. So you slowly start eliminating things. So it's not like I guess you would think about when you go to the doctor, you're like, break it to me, doc, what have I got? You kind of have an idea that this is coming. You're coming to this conclusion at some point. And so it's not the big news. It's news that you get over time.
Correct. Yeah. So my first symptoms about 2 years ago, I started having twitching in my triceps, and I didn't notice it. My wife noticed it. She's like, "Can you feel that?" And I'm like, "No, feel what?" She's like, "Your muscles are twitching in your tricep." And if you can think of, if you've ever seen any muscle stimulators where they send an electrical signal into your muscle and basically force it to contract, that's basically what my triceps were doing. And you know, I wasn't controlling it. It was just basically contracting on its own. And originally it was like, oh, that's funny. You know, I'm constantly working out and things like that. And then over time, it progressed from my triceps to my forearms, my biceps, my shoulders, my chest, my abs, my legs, my calves. And so basically my body is one big twitch, right? So at any given moment, my body's twitching in, you know, multiple places.
Is that maddening?
Oh, I mean, I don't even notice it anymore. But so in my line of work, I would go out and present to clients and things like that, and I'm in meetings, and my arm's just sitting there twitching nonstop, and it's kind of hard to disguise and things like that. So that I was a little, I guess, self-conscious about what was going on there. Didn't really know what was going on. And about February timeframe, my wife and I realized that maybe I should go to a doctor. This is not getting better.
Right.
I've tried vitamin supplements to see if I was vitamin deficient, potassium, etc., and nothing seemed to work. I quit drinking coffee for probably 2 or 3 weeks. Didn't notice a change, and so basically finished the internet on why your muscles twitch, and everywhere was like, oh, you know, they're probably the medical term for the muscle twitching is called fasciculations. And if you look online, you're like, oh, if your muscles are twitching, you know, they'll go away. If you don't have any weakness, it's not ALS, don't worry about it. And I didn't have any weakness anywhere in any of my limbs. But when I went to the doctor in February, I was like, you know, I need to go see a neurologist because this is definitely not normal.
Right.
And it's not getting any better. If anything, it's just, you know, getting worse and throughout my entire body. So went to a doctor to get a referral to a neurologist. I went to see a neurologist, I think, in May. And the neurologist was not a neuromuscular specialist. And so she said, okay, I haven't seen this before, but I'm going to order an EMG and I'm going to have you see our neuromuscular specialist. And so what an EMG basically does, it's a 2-part procedure where there's an EMG and then there's a nerve conduction study. And the EMG is really right now kind of the definitive, I don't want to say tool to diagnose ALS, but it will definitely determine that you have some sort of neurodegenerative issue going on. And so while I was getting my EMG in, I think it was in July, I had my, or June or July, I had my EMG, and I had started getting some weakness in my hands. And so the period from getting appointments with neurologists to getting EMGs to getting your results for EMGs, we're talking months.
Yeah.
So if I started this process in May and then I got my final diagnosis in the end of August, that tells you kind of what that window looks like. And so I went to get my EMG. I think the appointment was a month or month and a half after my original visit to the first neurologist. And they're like, oh, this procedure is going to take about an hour. And I was like, okay, we're about an hour and a half in. Well, let's do the right side as well as the left side, and then there was a tech and then a doctor, and then another doctor came in and started wanting to do additional tests with me. I'm like, what's going on here? And then my EMG took about 2 hours, coupled with the nerve conduction study. I don't want to get into too much detail about what the two tests do, but essentially they tested my entire body, left and right side, and that hour procedure actually was 2 hours for me. And they're like, oh, okay, call the doctor. The doctor should be able to tell you your results in, within 2 days or something like that. So I called in 2 days later. Hey, I'd like to find out how my EMG results went, and I got blown off. Like, oh, you have an appointment scheduled with our neuromuscular specialist, and he'll review the results with you. I go, well, that's not for like another month that I have my appointment.
Yeah.
And
at this point, you have a pretty good idea that ALS is a strong possibility? Or?
Now that I'm getting weakness in my hands, so when I went in to get my EMG, so I noticed that my things were getting a little more difficult, and the first thing I noticed I couldn't do that I normally do was cut my fingernails. And just as crazy as that sounds, I didn't have enough strength in my hands to close the clippers to cut my fingernail. I was like, that's not normal.
Right.
So I told the person that was administering the EMG that, hey, I seem to be having issues cutting my fingernails. Little did I know that that's one of the first things that someone that has ALS, I don't want to jump too far ahead in the story, but I've made a lot of friends in the ALS community since I've been diagnosed, and almost every single person, they tell me, oh yeah, I had troubles cutting my fingernails.
Yeah.
Okay, doctor never told me that, oh, you having troubles cutting your fingernails?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's ALS. Everyone was
What happened when you were cutting your fingernails? Like, cut the skin? Like,
no, you just don't have enough strength to actually, I can't pinch the clippers to cut the nail. I don't have enough strength in my hands to push down to cut the nail.
Yeah, I'm not trying to play dumb here, but I'm like, well, something so simple that I just trimmed my fingernails the other day. I'm like, and I cut myself, but I had no idea, like, well, what is it? So
I don't have enough pinch strength.
From what you remember, just this is something simple, but I think that people can relate to is how hard is it in comparison from a kid? It's effortless.
Right.
Clip your fingernails. And now, what does it feel like?
It takes me about a half hour to cut my fingernails.
Is it harder physically to squeeze down, or just
I can't squeeze down, so I've had to modify. I have to put my clippers on my knee and push down because I have strength in my shoulders, and I use my whole hand to push down on the clippers that are basically on my knee. And so I use the force of my knee and the force of my hand down on the clipper to cut my nails.
He's sort of doing a slap chop technique.
Yeah, I can't. I don't have enough pinch strength in my fingers to cut the nails on both hands. And so that was the first indicator that something was. At the time I got my EMG, I could still cut my nails, but it was difficult. Now I can't. Forget it. I can't cut with clippers.
I want to jump in and ask you. So the diagnosis has come, and I remember going through this with you. It's pretty obvious that whatever it was, if it wasn't ALS, wasn't going to be good news. But it was also, for me, frustrating that, oh, I got an appointment in 6 weeks.
Right.
It's like, yeah, chop, chop. Like, this stuff, it takes people quick if it goes untreated, depending on the kind that you have. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, and so I think the important thing to note is the average lifespan or life projection after diagnosis is 2 to 3 years. So think about that now, where it takes 6 months to get diagnosed.
Yeah.
And you might have 2 or 3 years on average.
Yeah. And you're losing a large portion of that on wait time.
Correct.
Diagnosis time.
Granted, there's really no treatment either. So, but you could be, there's no treatment, but there kind of is treatment. So, I don't want to jump too far ahead on that side, but so just to kind of wrap up on my diagnosis story, the diagnosis is a little bit of a painful process. They take blood, they do all these tests. I think I had 12 blood panels. They look for different types of cancer, certain types of immune issues, and there's vitamin deficiencies and everything.
Yeah.
Right. And all my panels came back normal. And during that period, and you were kind of riding along in the process, you're hoping that a panel comes back and says you have cancer.
Yeah. So
right?
you have something at least
Because
to-
now
yeah.
you can cure cancer.
Right.
I can't cure ALS.
Right.
So for the ALS diagnosis, more or less is a death sentence because you don't really have the hope you have to survive is not, you're not going to get cured. The prognosis is not going to be good one way or the other, but I said the average lifespan after, projected lifespan after diagnosis is 2 to 3 years, but there are so many different flavors of ALS that, for example, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, he died about a month and a half ago. He was diagnosed in 2017, and he died a year later. And from what I understand, he didn't really want to seek treatment or anything. He didn't want to. I think he was in denial that he had the disease or something. But there are steps that you can take to be more productive post-diagnosis. And when I got diagnosed, I was like, okay, there's nothing I could do about it. And you know me, I'm a pretty positive person.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, how can I find the positive in this? And can I take this terrible news and do something with it? And so I immediately just started building relationships in the ALS community to see where I could make a difference. And can I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not going to find a cure, but can I use my small sphere of influence to have some impact on fundraising for research or fundraising for services and things like that? So I've been busy, kind of my new purpose and my new job.
Let's talk about that human factor for a second, because I've known people in the last year as friends of mine, and you as friends of mine sitting here, that have gotten the worst news you could possibly get at a very early age. I mean, we're all the same age, and I just had another close friend who was a Marine, got diagnosed with terminal cancer, misdiagnosed originally, but at this stage they said you got a year to live. And how do you process that first? How do you share that with your family in that same question? And then as you continue to lead as a leader, to help others that will follow in this wake, in the midst of a cure, in lack of a cure. And then in the same regard, how does your family deal with not only the news, but you dedicating a portion of your remaining time here, knowing it's short? I mean, it's happening. There's no way to dance around that issue.
Yeah.
And that's sobering. But how do they also deal with you dedicating a portion of your time to helping others instead of just diving into the family and smothering them with your attention and love?
Right. Well, good questions. My kids still have to go to school. My wife still goes to work. So my new job basically is to make a difference in the fight against ALS. In fact, I'm creating a nonprofit. My nonprofit's going to be called Make a Difference Against ALS. And I have the domain name, or about the URL, madals.org. So makeadifferenceals.org. Because I really believe that without a purpose, this kind of bleak outlook and diagnosis that I have, I need to get up every day and feel like I'm making a difference. Because if I don't, then this disease is going to win. And I need to, shortly after I was diagnosed, I was like, okay, I reached out to some top researchers. Since I played college football and soccer my whole life, I've experienced some brain trauma, and I reached out to leading scientists that are dealing with brain trauma and causal relationships between brain trauma and ALS, and built relationships with them. I'm participating in a study at University of California, San Francisco, with a team up there that's doing research on just that. And so I've had tau protein analysis done. I was injected with radioisotopes, and had my cerebral spinal fluid taken from them to analyze. And they're doing some really good things, not just on that causal relationship, but also they're trying to make progress on identifying these tau proteins that in your cerebral spinal fluid could indicate a diagnosis of ALS. So if they can identify a particular protein in your spinal fluid and can reliably say this person has ALS, now we just took that 6-month diagnosis window. Some people it takes longer than that, and we've condensed it into a single test for a particular protein. So if I can help contribute to their research to get closer to that more streamlined diagnosis, that's great. And so wherever I can make a difference and volunteer myself, that's what I'm doing. I was just at UC Irvine on Wednesday to be screened for one of the most promising treatments is stem cell treatments. And so on Wednesday, I was screened for a clinical trial for a stem cell treatment that they would take my stem cells, culture it with a drug called Neuron, and then re-inject those cultured stem cells into my spinal cord. And hopefully those new stem cells would take on the personality of these motor neurons that are dying and be stronger, more vibrant cells that aren't going to die. So
the treatment stuff, we got to get into that, and I want to get into the podcast and stuff, but I do want to go back. I mean, this is the moment of humanity, right? Like where you're looking at your mortality, and there's a lot of ways to deal with this stuff, but when you dive into work, how do you also account for, like Scott's question, that, you know, the family, there are going to be plenty of time when they're caring for you, you know, when you're not able to, you know, you're sort of trapped in your body, your brain still works,
right,
but your body won't. There'll be a lot of that time, but how do you also balance out, like, no fooling, you know, you may have, let's say, who knows, 48 months of mobility and verbal communication. How do you make sure that you have that work-life balance? Because it's you know, it's the shitty lottery, right? Like you win the lottery, you have all this freedom to do whatever you want. You've got freedom in that, you know, you don't have to worry about when you're 60, at least so far, right?
Right.
So how do you sort that? I mean, that's the person sitting there on the bus who's going to work. It's like, holy shit, what would I do in this case? So let's talk to those folks.
Right. Well, so what I've tried to do is identify something I can do with each of my kids that they'll remember. So oldest son, who's 15, has played soccer most of his life, has grown up. I'm a Chelsea fan out of London. And so he's grown up to be a Chelsea fan just like me. I'm trying to get us to go to a Chelsea game together while I can. And so I'm trying to identify things like that where I can go do something with each of my kids that they'll remember, that I know will be important and meaningful for them.
Yeah.
My younger son, Parker, and my oldest daughter, Ariane, they like roller coasters like me. So we go ride crazy roller coasters as often as we can, and try and do that, even though it's hard for me to get around, like Six Flags, or went to Knott's Berry Farm a week ago. I do it because I enjoy doing that with them, and they have a thrill, you know, going and doing that. So I'd like to be able to go visit more parks with them and enjoy that, exploring these crazy roller coasters with them. So I'm really trying to find something that I can do with each of them that they will remember, because what I don't want them to remember is me sitting in a wheelchair, not being able to speak. That's eventually where this disease takes you.
Right.
So let's see, when was that? Two and a half months ago or so. I went up to Seattle for, during this whole process, like I said, I've been building friends and relationships in the ALS community. One of those people is Steve Gleason. And so I've got to know Steve, and his Team Gleason is his charity or nonprofit or foundation. And then he also helped create something called Answer ALS, where he's bringing researchers together along with patients to collaborate to find a cure. So Answer ALS and Team Gleason had an event up in Seattle to raise money, and they brought in, Harry Connick Jr. was the host, Macklemore performed, Mike McCready from Pearl Jam performed, and a couple other people, Lord Huron performed. But anyway, it was a big event to help raise money. So Steve invited a bunch of, we're called PALs, people with ALS. I'm not a big fan of that moniker, but he invited a bunch of PALs to come. There were about 25 of us that had ALS in various stages. And so I took my 15-year-old son, Hunter, with me to that. And I think it was the first time that he got to see this is where this disease goes, right? So he met my friend Brian, who's a lawyer in Chicago that was diagnosed a year ago. And we'll get into more detail about what I'm doing with him. But he was diagnosed a year ago. He's not much different than me. He looks normal if you look at him. And then there's other people like Steve. Steve Gleason can't speak. He uses basically a computer screen and uses that. He has eye tracking that where he types basically what he wants to say, and then he voice banked his voice. So it's his voice that the computer assembles the words that he wants to speak and the sentences that he wants to communicate. And so my son got to see, okay, we go from here to, we met a gentleman who was in the Air Force, lives in Texas, and he could still speak, but was in a wheelchair. And so, you could see different stages of where this disease takes you. And
what was that like for your son to see that whole time lapse unfolded in front of him? Was it emotional for him? Did he shut down?
No, he didn't shut down. And I asked him, I go, do you have any questions? I asked all my kids, do you have any questions about what this is doing? Because I don't really feel like they grasp. I have 4 kids. I asked them repeatedly, like, hey, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask me. I tell anybody, if anybody has any questions about ALS, I'm happy to help communicate help clarify any questions that you have. The problem is people don't know about ALS. And so ALS isn't in the forefront of people's minds. Even though we know that Stephen Hawking had ALS, you don't see how Stephen Hawking lives day to day. And you don't see how Steve Gleason, Congressional Gold Medal Award winner recently, lives day to day. And you might see him on the sidelines at a Saints football game or something like that. He'll be on, there'll be a feature, I think, next week on NFL Network. There'll be a feature about him on NFL Network. But the struggles that you go through day to day, nobody really understands it. Like, here's a good example. I went to an event. My Huskies were in the Rose Bowl. We had a football event 2 days before the Rose Bowl. I drove up to LA to go to this event. I wore a button-down shirt, but I didn't want to get my button-down shirt all wrinkly while I was driving in the car. So I got up to LA, went to put my shirt on. I can't button shirts.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have the strength in my hands to button a button-down shirt. I could not even do one button on that shirt. I had to go ask the parking lot attendant, hey, man, I know this is weird. This is really weird, but can you help me button my shirt? I have ALS, and my hands are super weak, and I can't button my shirt. He's like, yeah, that was a little weird, but yeah, I'll do it. And so I had to go ask a stranger to help me button my shirt because I didn't think ahead to go.
I wouldn't know what to do if someone asked me that.
Yeah.
There's some people out there that feign disease. Like, there was a thing on news here in LA about a guy that was bedridden and he hired all these nurses. I mean, there's some weirdness, but that would. But think, turning the table around, how uncomfortable that is for you, Phil, to have to ask.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero, co-host of the Break It Down Show and fellow producer here at Lions Rock Productions. And I'm proud to announce our newest show. It's called Justice. Season 1 is going to be a deep dive into some of the cases I personally worked on as a licensed private investigator, and you'll get a unique view into the criminal justice system that may just challenge some of your personal notions about how it should work and open your eyes in ways you never imagined. So keep your ears open for Justice, a brand new podcast coming in January from Lions Rock Productions to iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Bedridden and he hired all these nurses. I mean, there's some weirdness, but that would. But think, turning the table around, how uncomfortable that is for you, Phil, to have to ask someone to button your shirt.
When we were at Six Flags, it took him a long time in the bathroom, and we were at the point where, like, he was prepared to ask me to refasten up his pants.
No, to get my pants undone. Like
Pete loves buttoning other dudes' trousers up. Really unbuttoning.
Like, I have a hard time unzipping my pants.
Yeah.
So we're looking at tying shoes, doing buttons, using zippers. They're all super difficult for me. Getting dressed is one of the hardest things. Putting on a pair of socks, so difficult. Like you wouldn't think it, but I get so exhausted just getting dressed in the morning. That's the hardest part of my day is getting ready. So I modify what I wear. I mean, I'm wearing shoes that have laces in them today, but I've purchased boots now that for work that they're pull-on boots. There's no laces. I have slip-on shoes that I wear most of the time because what I've learned is it's not worth it to struggle to tie your shoes or to button your shirt or whatever. I need to make my life as easy as possible and do the things that you conserve my energy so that I can do the things I need to do instead of waste. I mean, I sat in that parking lot last week or a week and a half. I spent 15 minutes trying to button a button. And I was like, this isn't going to happen. And so that's when I was like, okay, who around can I ask? These parking lot attendants will probably be the least offended or weirded out by me going and asking them. So
you also had said before, like, our inclination is to fight like hell, but you were advised like, no, like you've got to take it easy on your body because you don't recover like someone who goes to the gym and works out. And this is not something that you just smash your head into the wall and push harder.
Right. Yeah. So when I tear my muscles down, their ability to recover is not like a normal person. So it's important for me to exercise. It's important for me to stretch, but I don't want to break down my muscles because they don't recover like a normal muscle would. My body cramps up a lot when I exert or when I use my muscles, and so I exhibit cramping right now. Like in the last week and a half, my arches of my feet cramp up multiple times a day.
I think I found a new yoga partner.
Yeah.
Come do hot yoga with me.
Yeah, I stretch all the time. Like that's.
You got to get in the studio with me. Have you ever done it?
No.
All right, you're coming.
All right.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
So I've learned how to adapt. So from a clothing perspective, I try to wear. I mean, I'll wear sweats a lot, but
what about jumpsuits?
No,
I think you would look smashing in a jumpsuit.
Yeah. Usually
we got to find some positives out of this.
Yeah.
Like my buddy lost his leg, John, who was living here, and I go, well, look, you got a lot of great costumes coming up for Halloween. You got pirate and pirate. I mean, there's a lot.
I saw a guy at it was one of those Vets Ride Across America kind of things, and we were in Key West, and they have a shark hanging, like a dead shark, and he runs over and slides into it and puts his stump up in the shark's mouth and starts screaming, ah! And he pulls his leg, he got jokes.
Because Phil knows we would be failing him if throughout this whole process we did not continue to fuck with you.
Yeah.
And, because that would mean we would, we'd be falling on the other side of the fence of those that are like, poor Phil. We'll never be poor Phil. We're your friends.
Yeah. You have to have a sense of humor.
Yeah. So if there is, and no one wants to make light of any, disease or something, you just can't, it's so out of your control. There's just, this happens. I think you may have already leaned into the answer to this question. If there's got to be something good that comes out of this or something that you can leave, what do you think it is looking forward to the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, so the foundation that I'm creating, Make a Difference, it teaches me, and what I'm trying to say to my kids and people that I interact with is, try and make a difference in everything you do, because for me, my time is limited. So everything I do, I want to try and make a difference, right? Because if I can leave an imprint, then I'm doing my job. Whether that's in work or school or whatever, for me right now, the imprint I'm trying to make is in this ALS community and try and make a difference there. Whether it's through supporting research or I mentioned my lawyer friend Brian in Chicago. He's going to be launching a whole patient-driven ALS movement called I Am ALS, and he has a political background and has a background in political campaigns and political fundraising, and he's treating ALS like a political campaign where he's going to go out and campaign for raising money for ALS to help find a cure and provide support services. ALS has a branding issue, and we're going to try and correct that. And so part of what I'm going to do is I'm partnering with him. I'm going to be putting together a podcast where I'm bringing in top researchers to talk about what they're doing, bring in experts that can speak to, from a patient point of view, there's a timeline, and things are important to you in that timeline. So I'm going to bring in subject matter experts to talk about those things that are important to you as an ALS patient and family throughout the timeline. So you should be thinking about this. Once you're diagnosed with ALS, you have the ability to file for Social Security benefits and go on Medicare and things like that. And so this is what you need to do for that. And so there's a whole world that once you're diagnosed, that you spend a lot, most ALS patients spend a lot of time researching and investigating from all these disparate sources.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and consolidate them all into one place and bring in the people that know to speak about their particular subject matter. And whether it's clinical trials, this is what we're doing and what we're trying to do and the results we've seen, to, hey, you know what? You want to make your house an accessible house? This is what you need to do. And hey, did you know that there's certain foundations out there that will help you convert your house and build ramps and things like that so you can get your wheelchair into your house? You know, things like that most people don't know. And we're going to use the imals.org site as kind of the jumping off point for, you know, he's aggregating a bunch of information. My podcast will just be one of the ways that we're going to disseminate information as well.
When you look ahead, and you don't get to say cure ALS because that's obviously a goal, but what's your legacy?
That I didn't give up. That I, like I said, just tried to make a difference, and hopefully I can. I think finding a cure for ALS is a good goal, but as Steve Gleason told me, hey man, finding a cure is not going to help me.
Right.
So what he focuses on with Team Gleason is providing support services and things for people that have been diagnosed, because that's what's important. And there's really a lack of funding to help support in-home care. You're going to need, you know, a full-time caregiver at some point. And the ability for most people to do that, it costs on average between $150,000 to $200,000 a year to keep an ALS patient alive.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So you can imagine not many people can afford to do that without external assistance. What Steve tries to do is help ALS patients be as productive as possible through technology. So as far as he's concerned, there is no cure today, but technology is the cure as long as there's no cure. So it allows you to be a productive member of society. You can continue to work. You can continue to, you know, contribute and communicate with people. Without technology, you're kind of just dead in the water, because you can't communicate. You need technology to breathe. You need technology to eat.
Yeah.
You need technology to get around. So,
what are you going to do on those days where you're in bed and that wash of anxiety comes over you where you just don't want to do anything? What's going to motivate you to keep doing that?
It's a good question. I don't know. I hope I don't get to that point where I don't want to do something. As long as I'm still mobile and able to move around, I'm going to try and be as normal as possible. At some point, I'm going to be limited in what I can do, and I feel like if I'm only able to communicate through typing in some capacity, that's a perfect time to write a book. So I'll write a book or do something and still try and be productive. Like I said before, as long as I feel like I'm being productive, I'll feel like the disease is not beating me. As soon as I'm not productive, and I think it's fair to say that most ALS patients would feel that way. As long as you're productive and have a reason to be, then you're going to fight. As soon as you don't have a reason to be, then you're giving up. So as long as I have that reason to be, to get up every day, and that's what's going to motivate me. And whether it's, doing something for my kids or whatever, as long as I'm able to still be productive, then, the day that I'm not able to do anything, whether it's interact with my kids in any way or contribute in what I feel like is whether it's a paid work or what I consider work, then that's going to be a hard day to get out of bed.
What stokes you up about your future?
I get up every day excited to knock down walls and like I said, make a difference. I'm working with Team Gleason and University of Washington and Washington State, for example. We are going to
Cougars.
Well, so Steve went to Washington State. I went to UW.
Okay.
And so every year we play football in something called the Apple Cup.
The Apple Cup, yeah.
And so what we're planning on doing is having a fundraising competition for Team Gleason where for a duration or a period before the Apple Cup, we're going to have this competition to see which school can raise the most money for ALS and play on each school's loyalty and egos. And hopefully we can raise a lot of money for Team Gleason and ALS. And then at the Apple Cup, hopefully announce, have Steve and I at the game and at halftime or something announce, hey, this is the school that won. And, thank everybody for participating and things like that. So I'm trying to make a difference in that respect. And wherever I can, try and raise awareness, fundraise. I'm going up to Seattle next week. I'm going to be on the Go Huskies podcast, which is the UW Athletics official podcast. And, my goal is to really show people and build awareness around what ALS is and what it does to people. Because
I tell you, man, in those punctuated moments where you don't feel like doing it, I'm here right next door to you to be there for you. I know you got a huge support group at home with your immediate family, but I use this word a lot, is capacity, because there's a lot of people that have ALS, not a lot, but of those that do, they can't make an impact. They can't make a difference. And for you to have that in you, to have the capacity to be honest and to just lay it all on the table and tell people you can't zip your trousers and you got to ask El Pedro to zip your fly. There's people that hide it and they can't share that, and that capacity, man, is right there. Just to this point, you've made a difference. I mean, just sharing this story, this hour together, I think makes a difference. It makes an impact, and to do that, I think that you're going to continue to be an inspiration to a lot of people, man, and it makes me proud to be your friend.
Thank you.
Yeah,
same.
Seriously, brother.
Yeah, it's odd to me. People keep telling me I'm courageous. I'm like, I have no choice. I really don't. Like, I have to do what I'm doing. Otherwise, I don't have a choice.
Well, I think the choice is what I just kind of encapsulated is you could just keep to yourself and hide everything and keep it to, not everyone wants to air their dirty laundry, but you made a choice. You're going to continue to educate and bring awareness, and that in and of itself is something. There's a lot of people that just do nothing. All they do is complain and they feel sorry for themselves, and that's a natural psychological tendency, because everybody, whether you got ALS or cancer or PTSD, there's a tendency where you just want to feel sorry for yourself. You can feel sorry all day long, but it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change anything. I think as you move forward, if you made the mental decision that you're going to help others despite the obstacles that are in front of you, and you can see them, they've been spelled out to you by the doctors, by your friends and family, you're making a difference, man. That's huge. That is huge.
And you don't get to say, you can say whatever you want, but it's not that you're not courageous. And Scott and I know about this.
It comes in a lot of different flavors.
Yeah.
The military, guys that have been to war and combat, we do not own words like courage and sacrifice and service. You have those in your lexicon as well, and they come in all different flavors and colors. And your courage and your sacrifice and your service to the ALS community is going to be immense just by doing the pod, by staying connected with Steve and doing the Apple Bowl and whatever it is you choose to do. That's going to make a fucking impact, and that's going to be part of your legacy, I think. In addition to everything you're doing with your kids and your wife and your family and these milestones that you've laid out, that's more than most are willing to do. So
you're leading, and you're leading with courage. You're standing in the face of something that's scary, and you're saying, "I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna," and then you just keep that's courageous, man, and it's laudable. And if I think I'm having a bad day, I think, well, shit.
A lot of adults, I think, have a problem owning that. Like, I'm being courageous. I'm proud of myself for this. And I'll share an example that just popped into my head watching local news. Is a 8-year-old kid called 911 for his grandfather who is having low blood sugar. And he was an 81-year-old guy, and the kid called 911, and the camera crew's interviewing him. And this kid is so ostentatious, and he goes, "Well, I'm just glad I could help my grandpa, and I'm proud that I called 911." And that unvarnished dialogue from an 8-year-old that, kids don't lie. He said, "I'm proud of myself." And I was like, he should be proud of himself. That's the first thing that popped into my head. And adults, I think, we have this, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, we're just too humble at times, and we don't take a lot of credit or stop to recognize the moments where we have made a difference or an impact at some point, and really take stock of that. I'm guilty of it myself.
Sure.
I'm sure.
We all do it. Tell us your website one more time.
So it's not up and running yet, but it's going to be MADALS, MADALS.org. I'll get it up and running soon. But thanks to the folks at Charity on Top, they help give me some guidance on setting up my nonprofit and things like that. So,
yeah, Kathy and Marshall are awesome.
Are we going to find a new acronym other than PALS? Is that going to be a goal?
Oh, it's just
Let's do that. Will it upset people? We don't want.
Probably. I mean, I'm new to the community, but I just.
Oh, here's a new guy. He wants a new acronym.
Could it be WALS? Like, woo, ALS. Let's get after it.
I don't know. It just.
FALS, fuck ALS.
Yeah.
Like cancer got that one already.
It just. I mean, I don't know. It just. Maybe it'll grow on me, but I was like, pals. What? No, that just. I don't want to be a pal.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it makes sense. Person with ALS, but. When Gleason first, used that, I was like, pals? Like, okay.
We're all pals around here.
I'm probably not going to use that, but
right.
I got to call my pal today.
I call my ALS friends my unfortunate friends. It's unfortunate that the circumstances had us meet, but I'm glad that you're my friend. You're my unfortunate friend. And I've met a lot. There's a guy I'm meeting with next Wednesday after my occupational therapy session. Pat Dolan lives up in Redlands. Going to meet with him. There's a guy, Anthony Carbajal, who lives in Murrieta that I try and get together with as often as possible. And I try and learn from these folks as much as I can, and then take from what I hear from them, and then see, okay, is there a gap that's not being filled in this ALS community that I think I can fill? And that's part of what my role is.
What's the name of the podcast going to be?
Well, so I was going to go with
proposed title.
I have a working title of Diagnosis ALS, but I think I'm going to partner with my friend Brian and his organization I Am ALS, and I think we're just going to throw it under the I Am ALS umbrella and just be the I Am ALS podcast.
Throw a swear word in there, and people will definitely tune in. I don't know what it is. Put a fuck or shit on the cover of book this day. It hits the New York Times bestseller list. So just something to consider. Just a little, Look, Gage. Hey, thanks for sharing today, man. And
thanks for having us out.
Let's do some more stuff.
Yeah.